I rise today as our nation honors the bravery and sacrifice of Santa Fe native Leroy Arthur Petry, an Army Ranger who in 2008 risked his life to save his fellow soldiers on the battlefields of Afghanistan. Today, Sergeant First Class Petry will be honored for his conspicuous gallantry with our nation's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor. I will be humbled to be at the White House along with Sergeant First Class Petry's family, friends, and fellow soldiers as President Obama honors him with the Congressional Medal of Honor. It will be a special day for Sergeant First Class Petry, for his wife, his children, and all his family, and for his fellow Americans, as he becomes only the second living active duty service member to receive the Medal of Honor for actions in Iraq or Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class Petry's story is one of courage and sacrifice and immense love of country. It's a story that began years ago in Santa Fe with a young man who struggled in high school but refused to give up and instead buckled down, dug deep, and found the hero within. A hero to the men he saved on that fateful day in Afghanistan, and a hero to all Americans who owe their freedoms to our brave men and women in uniform. It's the story that day in May of 2008 that I'd like to tell you about today. Sergeant First Class Petry was a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment when he and his fellow Rangers were deployed to capture a high-value target in Afghanistan. During their raid, they were engaged in a firefight with the enemy when several in their regiment were pinned down by grenades. Petry had already been wounded by bullet fire, shot through both legs by a hidden enemy. But Petry didn't allow his wounds to stop him as the battle raged on. Pinned inside a courtyard with a fellow Ranger, he continued the fight, calling in support and creating a brief pause in enemy fire by throwing a grenade their way. One enemy grenade exploded within 10 yards of Petry and a group of Rangers. The explosion knocked the Rangers down and wounded 2 members of the team. Soon after the first grenade exploded, the insurgents threw a second. This time the grenade landed near 2 of Petry's comrades, with no thought to his personal safety. Ranger Petry grabbed the grenade and attempted to toss it away. The grenade exploded as he tossed it, taking Petry's hand with it, but saving the lives of those near him. Now, losing a hand would have been enough to break most people, but not Sergeant First Class Petry. Instead, he calmly inspected his wound, stemmed the flow of blood with a tourniquet, and continued the fight, helping to pin down the insurgents until they could be killed. It was this immense act of bravery that saved the lives of his brothers in arms. In fact, one of his fellow Rangers, Sergeant Daniel Higgins, wrote in a statement about that day, quote, "If not for Staff Sergeant Petry's actions, we would have been seriously wounded or killed." On that fateful day in 2008, then Staff Sergeant Petry was no stranger to service to this country. He was on his 8th deployment. Let me repeat that. 8th deployment in support of U.S. operations overseas. His 6th in Afghanistan, and after 2 tours in Iraq. Sergeant First Class Petry's life of heroic service was based on humble beginnings. A 1998 story in the Santa Fe, New Mexico newspaper featured a then 18-year-old Petry. The young man was a senior at St. Catherine Indian School, the institution's final graduating class. He was also a recipient of the Bootstrap Award, which honored area high school seniors who had committed to improving themselves and their community. Here's what the teacher who nominated him wrote. Quote, "With a record of fights, suspensions, and ditching school, Petry realized that he was on a path that led nowhere. He tried harder in school and appreciated how it felt to make his parents proud. From a path to nowhere to a path to history as a national hero, Sergeant First Class Petry is an inspiration for all young people who are struggling to find their place in the world. To young people who may be considering giving up and taking a more destructive path, he is a model. 3 years after his heroic actions on the battlefield, Sergeant First Class Petry continues to give back to his country and his fellow soldiers. As a liaison officer for the U.S. Special Operations Command Care Coalition in Washington State, Sergeant First Class Petry provides a helping hand and much-needed resources to wounded soldiers, ill and injured service members, and their families. Here's what Leroy's father, Larry Petry, said of his son in a recent interview with a local New Mexico television station. Quote, "He's really overwhelmed by this. He keeps saying, 'Dad, I was just doing my job. Any other soldier would have done it.'" I think we'll all agree with what his father said in return. "Well, son, you did something great, and they really want to honor you for that." Despite all the attention and recognition brought by this award, Petry, like so many of those brave warriors before him, remains humble. A recent posting on his Facebook page reads, "The award is bigger than a person, and I will always remember that." New Mexico has a long and proud tradition of military service, exemplified in the heroic actions of Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry on the battlefields of Afghanistan. To Sergeant First Class Petry's wife, Ashley, and their 4 children, to his mother and father and siblings and extended family, I know I speak for the people of New Mexico and all of America when I offer the thanks of a grateful nation. You sacrificed your time, your loved ones, you sacrificed your time with your loved one so he could bravely serve our country. Along with Sergeant First Class Petry, you are all heroes in our eyes. Sergeant First Class Petry is highly deserving of this honor, and New Mexico is honored to call him a native son. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.